The Oasisaur is a colossal floating fantasy island, and the first new DLC creature for ARK Survival Ascended. Alright folks, my name is Freyn, and today I'll be going over all the details of how to tame and use Wildcard's latest bizarre creation. As always, if you find any of this useful, I hope you'll consider supporting the channel, as every little helps. But for now, let's dive right in. Now, as with any new tame, the first thing you're going to need to do is find one. And despite their sheer size, this can actually prove quite difficult with the Oasisaur. By default, the game will aim for a max of 2 wild spawns at a time, and should one be tamed or killed, it will be 4 hours, or 2 if you're in single player, before it makes an attempt to try and spawn a replacement. On top of that, they only spawn at level 1, and they don't share their spawn zone with anything else. So there's no special tricks you can do to try and force that spawn to happen sooner. But if you are on the hunt for an Oasisaur, this red region here is where you're going to want to look. They can of course wander just like any other wild creature, but they'll only go so far, so certainly don't expect to be seeing any out in the middle of the map or near the world scar for instance, just purely out in the inner part of the dunes on the eastern half of the map. Okay, so we found our target Oasisaur. Now we need to start preparing. First thing you'll need is the Bob's Tall Tales pack, as the only way to tame this creature without the DLC is by using admin force tame. Second is either a flying mount or at least a Procoptodon, as to tame one you need access to the pool on its back, and they are incredibly tall creatures, so you need some way of getting up there. The third thing is going to be a good weapon, as you need to deal quite a bit of damage. Pump action shotgun or sniper rifle will probably work quite well, but a sword or pike could also potentially do the job in a pinch. And then the fourth and final thing you'll need is a death essence from a tamed creature. Almost all tames will drop these on death, the only exceptions I've found in testing being other Oasisaurs, the Titanosaur and the rock elementals. They last for 24 hours, so you do have a chance to go out and hunt for an Oasisaur after losing your tame. But it is going to be better to breed something specifically for the purpose of taming and then put it down when ready. Now of course there are absolutely priorities for which essence you want to use for this, but we'll talk about that more once we've had a look at the method itself. So we've got our preparation done and we're boarding our Oasisaur. Our next step is going to be to stand in the pool and place our essence into its inventory. If it's been recently attacked, we won't be able to access this and we'll need to wait for it to calm down. But all being well, we can drag this across and it will disappear instantly, and instead we'll get this floating baby form of our previous tame with a nice health bar above it. And now, incoming waves of vultures. We must protect that baby. If that dies, the taming is over and we have to start again. We just need to kill every single vulture as it comes in, preferably with a loaded weapon, that helps. It doesn't matter if we hit the baby ourselves, we can't actually damage that. We can damage the Oasisaur we are stood on though, and while it does have a lot of health, it doesn't actually heal on taming, so we still want to be pretty careful if we can. Each successfully completed wave will increase our taming progress, and the number of vultures, their levels, and how many are in that initial spawn is all determined by how far along we are. And that brings us back to the creature essence. The amount of progress we get for each wave is based on the essence we use, but it's not creature level or creature type that's important this time, it's health. We're talking about the actual numerical value, including level ups, not the underlying stat points. Every wave you will get 2% taming for every 1000 health that the creature had, up to a maximum of 20,000. The sweet spot for this though is going to be between 17,000 and 19,500, because below 17,000 we'll have to do 4 or more waves, and above 19,500 we'll have to do the top hardest wave as our final one. By using this sweet spot, we get to still do the minimum number of 3 waves, and it'll use the first, second and fourth groups instead of the first, third and fifth. So overall, less vultures to kill and lower levels. And that is your taming method. Just rinse and repeat until 100%. Now, I've obviously done this several times for testing at this stage, and typically at the end of it, the essence I used is gone. It doesn't give me anything back. But this last time I did it for the guide has actually revived the baby Rex for me. And I've been completely unable to figure out if not getting it's a bug, or it's simply some form of mechanic that I've missed. So if you've tamed one yourself, let me know what happened with yours. But for now, let's move on. The first thing to look at for our new floating friend is, of course, its stat line, how it compares to other mobile-based tames. Well, immediately we can see it's got a terrific chunk of health at 20,000 and a pretty nice weight stat of 2,500, which is always going to be handy if you're trying to build a base on its back. Only 100 stamina may feel a touch on the low side, but they are actually capable of regenerating it in midair, and sprinting doesn't really give a gigantic boost over its base 8 meters per second anyway, so you probably won't need to dip into it that much. It gains just under 1,000 health per point spent, but sadly only 100 weight, and with it only spawning at level 1, this means you're going to be quite limited in the long run to how much you can raise it. As far as its alternatives go, well, it may not be in the game yet, but the Mega Kellen is a pretty fair comparison in my eyes, and at level 1 we can see that although quite even across the board, the Oasisaur clearly comes off better in health and speed. A high level turtle though would of course be the better analog, and at 35 stat points we can see the Oasisaur is still ahead on health, but that weight stat has fallen so far behind and will only continue to do so with level investment. The Oasisaur, of course, though, can fly, so let's have a look at a different comparison with the Quetzal. Again, vastly outperforms the level 1 in the major areas, but also still even at 35 points. Quetzal does slightly outpace it when sprinting, and of course can actually attack, but the Oasisaur's build area is so much bigger, and it can stay in the air indefinitely, so as far as an airborne base goes, I'd say the Oasisaur still has the edge there. For anyone wondering, its drag weight is a colossal 3,000, and quite obviously therefore it cannot go into boss fights, and if you should decide to kill one for some reason, it's only worth 8 experience, so don't bother stacking up on notes and going hunting them down like you would a Titanosaur, it's going to give you nothing. They are a heavily restricted creature, unable to be bred, cloned or cryopoded. They have no need for a saddle, and again, for anyone curious, they drop massive poop. And in case you were hoping to get a whole fleet of these things, there is a 1 per tribe taming limit. It simply will not let you feed the essence if you already have one out there. Next up, we have the thing I've seen questioned the most about this creature, which is feeding. And yes, unlike the Titanosaur, this is not a raid creature, you can feed it. It does have appetite for only one thing though, and that is filled plant pots. If you haven't encountered this mechanic yet, you need to craft yourself a plant pot and a shovel, go out to the plant of your choice somewhere in the world, and simply dig. This will fill your plant pot, turning it green, and you can now feed it to your Oasisaur just like you would with any other creature by putting it in the inventory. There are 4 different food levels for this. The first is 25, which comes from any form of cactus or small bush. The second, at least according to the files, is 100 food, but I haven't managed to find anything which provides this value yet. Possibly they're on the island instead, but I haven't tested that thoroughly. The third is 400 food for the Joshua trees. They will show as a large tree on your plant pot. And the fourth is 1,000 food for an extra large tree, of which I've only found the 1 type so far. They're not too common, but they are certainly out there, and if you can find them, it will sustain your Oasisaur for a decent amount of time. That about covers all the basic info for now though, so let's move on. So the first and most obvious thing you'll find after taming is the resource generation. There are 10 different variants that can spawn, and each has a different mixture of nodes visible on their back. These are purely visual and cannot be harvested, but if you head to the pool area you should be able to access a second special weightless resource inventory filled with various materials based on those nodes. You should find the maximum number of stacks it can possibly create already in there once you finish taming, and any you remove will gradually replenish over time, although it is extremely slow and the time is different for each resource. So think of these as more of a bonus for you and not just an active supply that prevents you from having to go out and gather normally. Each Oasisaur will of course only generate a few different types, but the complete list of possible resources you could get is wood, thatch, stone, flint, salt, obsidian, metal, oil, crystal, fiber, cactus, silica pearls, sand, and silk. Next up we have of course the flying build platform. 200 total structures can be built on its back, and so far from testing I've found the restrictions to be very similar to other platform creatures, preventing vaults, auto turrets, teleporters, transmitters and cryofridges from being placed. But one bonus it does get for construction is crop plots, which appear to not only be automatically irrigated but also fertilized and with a permanent 300% greenhouse effect as well, allowing for some pretty effortless farming if you've got the space to keep one. Now that weight limit of 2500 we mentioned earlier is of course going to be of concern for a mobile base, and neither the Oasisaur's inventory or any storage built on it have any reductions, but there are still ways you can work around this. Firstly, any creatures placed on its back have their own weight reduced by 15%, which, while not a lot, does still help. But more importantly, anything placed in a creature has its weight reduced by a further 66%. These reductions also stack with any built-in weight effects the creatures have of their own. For instance, adding 300 metal to an Anki only adds 14 weight to the Oasisaur it stood on. Storing things in the new wagons will also help with this, as they lower the weight of anything stored on them by 35%, and that brings the overall reduction up to a whopping 78.5% for anything stored in this way. Next on our ability list is the Gaias Embrace. This is a buff granted to any player or tame that stands in the pool on its back. A stack can be gained every 10 seconds up to a maximum of 20. And these provide increased health regeneration and speed. The values listed are 0.1 per stack, but whether this is a 10% multiplier over the base or simply a flat 0.1 per second, I'm afraid I just can't tell at this stage. Now overall, I don't think this is probably going to be too noticeable, but there's certainly no harm parking your tames in there for a bit of extra regeneration between excursions. And finally, our last ability, and the one that most will probably want to tame this for, the Resurrection. Simply take your death essence from Lost Tame and place it into the Oasisaur's inventory, where it will quite handily have its spoil time tripled, and then bring up the radial menu. On the right hand side you should now see a Resurrect option, an icon like a little pair of wings. And here you can select from a list of all present tames to return to life as a newborn baby. This is instant and can only be done once every 24 hours, so choose wisely which one you want to bring back. With further note that the taming process itself does count towards this, so you'll have to wait a full day after acquiring one in order to be able to bring a new tame back to life. Not something you can just dash out and grab when your favourite Thyla unfortunately kicks the bucket. And with that we have everything I can tell you about the Oasisaur. I'm sure there's probably something I've missed. If you know of something I have, please let us know in the comments so that others can see it too. Or just generally let us know what you think of this. I'm still not quite sure how I feel on the creature overall. It certainly remains to be seen how useful it will be in the long term, and while certainly not a combat creature having literally 0 attacks, I'm generally not overly a fan of these absolutely massive tames. But we're going to leave it there for today, so thank you all very much for watching. I'm sorry this guide has taken so long to bring out. Let me know what else you'd like to see, and I'll be back in the next one. Bye bye.